Hello everyone, this is Jonathan Little. I want to thank you for being here with me today for the 112th episode of Weekly Poker Hand. Today we have a fun river spot. I haven't watched this hand, I have no clue what that entails, but let's take a look. We're playing 10,000, 20,000 blinds. We have 700,000 chips to start the hand in the big blind, so 35 big blinds. Under the gun, 7-handed, a loose aggressive kid min raises. So we pick up Queen Jack of Diamonds. And this is a spot where I am going to call pretty much every time. We are never folding in this spot. We are happy to see a flop with the Queen Jack of Diamonds. Flop comes 6-4-3, 2 diamonds. That's great. And I go ahead and check. I think both checking and betting on 6-4-3 with 2 diamonds is a perfectly fine strategy. You could bet if you wanted to. Typically, you want to bet. If you can bet, say, maybe 70,000, your opponent can raise perhaps to 170,000, and then we can go all in for about 600-something thousand. I think that is actually a reasonable strategy. Usually, leading is a good idea when you have between about 30 and 50 big blinds, but I also like just checking. Just checking is a play that is hard to do much about, especially if you're checking with all of your good hands. So I check. My opponent bets 50,000 into the 100,000 pot, 117,000 pot, and I decided to call. The graphics went a little bit too fast on the replayer. Hopefully that's okay with all of you who are watching this on jonathanlowpoker.com or at YouTube. And whenever he bets 50,000, again, I don't think I want to raise at this point, because notice if I raise, I'll have to check raise to maybe 150, and that opens the door for my opponent to shove, in which case I would have to fold. And I am never, ever, ever trying to fold a good flush draw. So given I don't want to face the check shove all, or the bet re-raise all in, I think we just want to call. And again, for that reason, I think leading is an acceptable option here, especially on this board, because this is a board where I should have a much stronger range in general than my opponent, because I should be calling with all the marginal stuff, whereas my opponent should not be raising low cards from early position. Turns a 3, complete offsuit 3. I check, and my opponent checks behind, which usually entails that he probably has ace high or marginal pair. So knowing that he has ace high or marginal pair, the river brings a 5, which now the board reads 6-4-3-3-5, meaning a 7 or 2 is a straight. I obviously have way more 7s and way more 2s in my range than my opponent does, so this is a very good river for me. Given I cannot win if it goes check-check on the river, I think this is a mandatory spot to bet. And I would actually bet here with every unpaired hand, I think, which ends up being too many bluffs. But this is a scenario where I think it's fine to have too many bluffs, because my opponent's range of ace-high, primarily, is just not going to call very often at all. I think he is going to call with every overpair, probably pocket 7s. Pocket 7s and better. So pretty much any pocket pair he's going to call. But pretty much every unpaired hand, I don't think he's going to call. And he should have way more unpaired hands than he should pocket pairs. So how much should we bet in this scenario? This is a spot where you really want to figure out what your opponent is capable of thinking. If you think your opponent may level himself into folding if you make a small bet, thinking that you're quote-unquote obviously trying to get value, then a small bet is pretty sweet. On the other hand, if your opponent may view a small bet of, say, 65,000 into the 217,000 pot, if you may view that bet size as, just like whatever and cite pot odds and then call with ace high, then that bet becomes horrible, because now you're not making your opponent fold a lot of his range. So it's very important to know what your opponent is capable of in this scenario. I actually do bet 65,000, so 1/4 pot, and my opponent does fold. There are a lot of types of players, but there are two types of players we want to discuss whenever we get to this river. They're the guys who assume you just must have what you're representing and will make big folds based on that. And then there are the people who I call math boys, who look at the pot, say, I'm getting 4-1 pot odds, I'm never ever folding with anything. And in this scenario, you want to be betting big versus the math boys, and small versus the players who are capable of hand reading, who think that you are obviously trying to get value out of your straight or full house. So always try to figure out who you're against, what they're capable of, and go from there. And you learn that by paying attention to your opponents throughout all the other hands they're playing, and generally just assess what they are doing. If you are reading a book or playing on your phone or watching a sporting event, you're going to miss these types of things. You're going to miss spots where your opponents are somewhat reluctantly calling a small bet with ace high, Or you're going to miss spots where they, could easily have a pretty good hand and will make a somewhat hero fold because they think their opponent just has it every time. So make sure you're paying attention to that whenever you are at the poker table. So that's going to be it for this episode of Weekly Poker Hand. I want to thank you for being here. If you do not check out my blog every week, check it out. I spend a lot of time working on that each week, and I post either a video blog or an article or something I think could be educational to you. Every week I post that over at jonathanlittlepoker.com/blog. So check that out. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments and share it with your friends. By far, the most beneficial thing you all can do for me is to share the content I make with your friends. So if you could just share it with one person each, that would be fantastic for me. So thank you very much. I will be back next week with another episode of Weekly Poker Hand.